Welcome to Murder Dictionary Podcast. My name is Brianna, and that is Kelly.
Hey.
Before we get started, as always, we wanted to remind you of a few things that you'll find in the description and show notes every week. First of all, you will find links to our social media, so if you want to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, you can find that in the show notes. You can also find links to our resources for research this week. So every week, if you want to follow up on cases, find out some extra reading material, watch some videos, we got you. Just check out the links in the show notes. Also, we have links to resources for domestic violence, CPS, suicide hotlines, anti-bullying stuff.
Drugs.
And our hookup, just in case you need
or to
it.
get off of them.
You may need it after listening to the stories.
Yeah,
You
12
never
step.
know. All that.
Yeah.
We got you. We also have links to our Patreon and our Threadless. I usually try and say them, but I always fuck it up. So the links are in the show notes. So if you want small merch items and bonus episodes, check out our Patreon. And if you want larger items like t-shirts and phone cases and all that kind of stuff, then check out our Threadless.
Should we do like full life-size body pillows of ourselves?
I was thinking blow-up dolls, but that's cool too. You can call it a pillow if it makes you feel better.
It's like the same thing. You're
They're both going to be covered in cum anyway.
Penetrate both.
So you can check out those on Threadless. We're going to get on that right away. Or someone could just like fill up a t-shirt, right?
Totally.
With fluff. Cut a hole in it.
Draw our faces on it. You could be one side and I could be the other.
Yes, we could have them flippable.
Could be ass to ass.
That's perfect. Ass to ass. So we wanted to thank a few new Patreon supporters for this week. This week we wanted to say thank you to Jillian, Paul, Jennifer, and Courtney.
Jillian, Paul, Jennifer, and Courtney.
Man, you
so
get
good.
it every time.
Yes. Thanks, guys.
So thank you for your support on Patreon. And I think with all that said, we can get started on our story. So this week, we're doing a Valentine's Day case.
Oh, because it's fuck week.
Yeah.
It's like Shark Week.
It is fuck junk week. So, I mean, today isn't the 13th officially Galentine's Day?
Waffles, right? Don't we need some waffles and stuff?
I didn't bring you any presents.
Amy
I'll make it up to you later.
Okay, cool. I stuffed Amy Poehler in the closet, so
oh no,
she's covered in waffles.
I would like that. She seems like fun.
Mm-hmm.
She's covered in waffles. So we're going to do a Valentine's Day case. So this week we will be talking about Susan and John Hamilton. Cool?
Cool.
So let's start out with Susan.
Wait, the president?
No.
Wait,
close. Super close.
Was he not I don't know. I don't know anything.
So Susan Shibley was born in 1945 in a small town near Oklahoma City. Her parents were a blue-collar couple. They spent most of their time running their business. They owned a cafe, so a lot of times the kids were hanging out there, doing their homework there. They spent a lot of time just kind of growing up at the cafe. Susan was the only girl of 5 children in her family, which is like a good 3 too many children in my opinion, but that's just me. Susan's former classmates said that she was the kind of beauty that would turn heads when she walked into a room, which I kind of hate including that because it's always just, someone's going to get murdered if they talk about how beautiful they are.
Yeah, of course.
It's just a bad omen. But that's just what a lot of people said about her, They also said that she was really sweet and she was really intelligent and she was very dynamic, engaging person. People would talk about meeting her at like social events and always remembering her. She was just that kind of person that was very memorable and, I don't know, easy to get along with, it seems. So, in addition to her outer beauty, people really always talked about her inner beauty. Susan married really young and she had 2 children, but she was separated from her husband by the mid 80s. In 1985, 39-year-old Susan went to a friend's birthday party and met 37-year-old John Hamilton, who was a prominent OBGYN in the Oklahoma City area. Friends say that Susan and John had a really instant connection that everybody noticed just that first night that they met. And they also had a lot in common. Both of them had recently separated from their first marriages, and they each had 2 kids from their first marriage. So John asked her on a date, and pretty quickly they become a couple. John spent the next couple years trying desperately to just sweep Susan off her feet. It was very clear that he was madly in love with her from the beginning. He was constantly doing like big, grand romantic gestures, giving her gifts, taking her on vacations.
Free pap smears.
All the pap smears you want. You want me to like smush your boobs?
Yeah.
You want a mammogram? We got you.
He's like, did I mention I was a doctor? Swept.
So a nurse named Vesta Hall that worked at John's clinic said that he fell head over heels for Susan immediately, and everyone could tell. Vesta also said, quote, "I wish I had someone that would look at me the way John looks at Susan. I just felt like they were very happy." I feel like everybody that talks about them says that they're happy, but there's something in the back of my head that makes me feel like John was a little bit more into Susan than she was into him. You know what I mean?
There's always that tip scale.
Right?
You know?
Like that's me just kind of assuming or editorializing. I don't find any witnesses or anybody that just is flat out saying that, but it really seems like everybody talked about how much John loved Susan and not always how in love both of them were, if that makes sense.
Did he look at her like this? That's how I look at you.
It's a nice, like, come hither stare. I don't think your eyes could get any wider right now. I don't know whether to be turned on or scared.
It's a mixture of both. That's
fear boner for sure. So I don't know. I mean, that's just my opinion, but it just seemed like we all know those couples where one person you kind of can tell feels a little bit stronger than the other. And it seems like John and Susan kind of had that dynamic.
It's me all the time. I'm always the one that's
it's
like,
that
I
look
love
you just gave me.
Yeah, I got to stop doing that, right? Because I'm not a doctor. So I can't just be trying to sweep people.
Or you could just become a doctor. I mean, that's always an option. I'm just saying.
I don't know how much more time I have, dude.
It's just a lot of work, though. Yeah, I get it.
Hard work.
So after a little while, John asked Susan to marry him, and they were married at a country club 2 years after their first date. John bought Susan a Porsche as a wedding gift and continued after they were married to take her on really extravagant vacations and buy her a lot of gifts. The Hamiltons became a power couple in Oklahoma's high society, and they frequented a lot of country clubs, various upscale events, and they threw a lot of parties and entertained a lot of people. John and Susan were often mentioned in the society pages of the Sunday Oklahoman.
I wonder what kind of articles it was like.
Yeah, it seemed like it was just about what they were doing. It was the equivalent of like page 6, but for local Oklahoma people.
Okay.
Yeah, they were just always at events, throwing different parties, and they just turned up a lot. Different pictures or articles mentioned that they were attending various things, charity things. I don't know. I couldn't find that they were specifically associated with any charities, but I just assume. You know?
You have money and you're throwing parties.
You're just throwing money at things,
You need a reason to party, right?
Yeah.
And spend money, so make it about something good.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Everybody said that Susan and John were inseparable, and they were in love. people referred to them as the, quote, perfect couple.
Barf.
So you
Fulton.
know some bad shit's about to go down. Nothing's perfect.
Yeah, and all the ones that are on the outside that are like perfect.
Right. It's all lies and deception.
Did you watch Big Little Lies? Speaking of deception, no?
Yeah.
You did watch Big Little Lies.
Yeah.
Okay, so like Nicole
the
Kidman's,
one. Yeah. Yeah.
they're like perfect couple. Where I was like, oh man, this is a hot couple. You know,
and then all of a sudden it's like, oh,
oh
no.
my god. Yeah, exactly.
It
always
all
something really fucked
appears
up.
good on the outside, which means it's far more fucked up on the inside.
Mhm.
Yeah. I mean, not always, but pretty much always.
Like 82% of the time.
So not only were they inseparable in their personal life, but Susan also started working part-time at John's OBGYN clinic. Susan was an outspoken pro-choice advocate, and she took on the task of basically managing his office.
I thought you were gonna say abortions.
She flipped the switch for the vacuum. So no, yeah, she just basically, I don't know if she had experience in that or whatever, or if it was just because she had good people skills that she could manage people and kind of man the front desk, but she just took it on. And also, she did really believe in the cause. She really was like a huge pro-choice advocate. So for her, it was like, I think I'd be good at this, and also it's an important thing for me to do for women.
Yeah.
You know?
And she was good at it. So.
Yeah. Yeah.
Go girl.
So the Hamiltons ran into issues because John performed abortions at the clinic. Since they were in a conservative town that was also in a conservative state, they got a ton of criticism and a lot of protesters attacked the clinic. Anti-abortion protesters had picketed at the clinic, and even at their home, they would show up and yeah. So the clinic was targeted by a militant anti-abortion group called the Army of God, whose members supported the 1998 sniper killing of an abortion doctor in New York State.
Jesus.
So they really, I mean, obviously it is something you take seriously when you're sitting there looking out your window and there's picketers, but also they knew that these people were not just passive. They were definitely pro-violence.
Yeah.
So it was scary.
Killing to stop killing doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, and like part of me understands. I don't have the same views, but I understand how they could think that killing one person would save other lives. That must be their mindset, but to me it absolutely doesn't make sense. But I know behind it that's probably what it is. Like, well, if I take out this doctor, they can't kill any fetuses. But fuck you also.
Yeah. Exactly. And if one McDonald's closes near me, I'm gonna go to Wendy's.
I gotta have my nuggets one way or another. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
You know? The members of the Army of God had faxed John Hamilton a wanted poster with his picture on it. And they also made threatening calls to Susan.
Kind of a cool poster. Like, yeah, I'm bad.
Dead or alive. The protesters had at one point attempted to set fire to his clinic.
Arrest them?
Yeah, I know. I couldn't find any information about anything that happened to the protesters, but it seems like that's pretty fucking drastic.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. And they even had an incident where Susan had been walking like out of the clinic to her car and gotten into a public confrontation with the protesters. And it didn't turn physically violent, but it got pretty heated, you know? I know they were trying to get them off their property, but it seemed like there really wasn't enough charges to stick, I guess, because it just kept continuing.
It's just escalating.
Yep.
At least it seems like.
So the Hamiltons knew that they were in danger. They were aware of what was going on, but they believed deeply in the cause and they knew they were doing the right thing. So they just wanted to keep their clinic open and they tried to do their best to stay safe. The Hamiltons had been together for about 15 years when they first started having marital issues. Friends say that being inseparable kind of began to wear specifically on Susan.
Oh, you mean they were suffocated?
Yeah.
That never happens.
Fucking shocking, right? So Susan began cutting back her hours at the clinic. She wanted to work less and less and kind of had a little bit more freedom. But if she wasn't at work, John would call her frequently, and he would also try to set up lunch dates with her so he could see her throughout the day. Another coworker at the clinic said that Susan loved to talk to John. She did love him, but at times she insinuated that it was all kind of a bit too much for her. In December of 2000, Susan and John had a pretty big disagreement. John had given his son from his first marriage money without Susan knowing it. John told Susan when she found out that it was just for car repairs, but Susan was really upset about it. So I don't know too much about the specifics, but I'm assuming that the son must have asked for money frequently. This couldn't have been an isolated thing. By all other accounts, Susan wasn't like money hungry or possessive of the money or anything like that. So it seems a little bit out of character for her to, get so bent out of shape. It doesn't seem like she's overreacting. I think that she probably was more upset that he hid it from her, and also that it seems like it must have been a constant thing
Yeah,
with this
obviously,
one child.
Yeah, she didn't agree with him giving him money or lending him money in the past or something, or it had just been too much.
Right.
Yeah.
Otherwise, he wouldn't hide it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it just doesn't seem to make sense otherwise. I couldn't find the specifics, but this is just kind of the conclusion I'm drawing.
Yeah, it's not like they're running out of money. He has money.
Yeah,
so
like
it's not an issue.
She's not really tripping about that. I just don't think that would be her.
More of a principle type
Yeah,
thing.
exactly. Exactly. It does just seem like it's what's behind it. It's the dishonesty, it's the deception, and also maybe that this child was a little bit more needy than the others, and it seemed like she possibly just wanted them to be more independent. So Susan's daughter said that she was really upset that he lied to her. She felt deceived. Her daughter even said that her mother had actually asked John to move out of their home. Like, she was that upset.
Oh, dang.
Yeah. But the fight, it blew over after a little while. But soon after, Susan began suspecting that John was having an affair. In early February, Susan found phone records that indicated John was making frequent calls to another woman. Susan's best friend for 37 years, Sherry Coffey, said that Susan told her on February 7th that she thought her husband was having an affair. That's the first she heard about it. So it happened like a week before Valentine's Day. Susan was really angry about the whole thing, and she stayed at Sherry's house that night, and she was kind of trying to get some space, think things over, see how she was going to approach it with him, and, then maybe she would go back afterwards and talk to him.
You know what you say? You say, who the fuck is this bitch?
That's always the way to start that conversation. Who dis?
Let me smell your dick.
Every time, just smell it. You gotta know. You gotta know. So the next day, Susan confronted John about the mysterious calls. The woman he called was a stripper named Aliana Aguirre. John said that he was not having an affair.
She's just a friend.
Right.
Of course.
That takes all her clothes off for me, like friends do.
Wait, you
don't be such a square.
Yeah, wait, sometimes they need the shirt off your back right then. And your pants.
And everything else. And also do a little spin. Maybe shake your ass a little bit. Just be friendly, So
take my glasses off with your butt cheek. Fork it, clap it back, bump it, bump it, bump it.
I just want to see someone's glasses like half tipped off their face, just face full of ass and glasses just hanging on for dear life. So, of course, John said he wasn't having an affair. And he said that he was just calling the woman because she was in desperate need of attention. So he could put like all the blame on the stripper. So he said Aliena was suicidal and that all the calls that he made to her were basically just explained by his concern for her mental health and her well-being. Like he's trying to make it completely Captain Save-A-Ho status.
Yeah, I'm just helping her.
Right, like you're trying to make it seem like you're doing a good thing. So not only are you trying to get out of the doghouse, but you're putting blame on someone else and making it seem like you're a fucking superhero.
Yeah, and he's not a psychologist or a psychiatrist, and he has all the resources to send her to someone.
That's not your area of expertise. It's called a fucking referral, dude. Like, refer to someone else. Yeah, I don't know. It's just, it's suspicious if nothing else, you know? So Aliena said that John had been calling her 10 times a day.
She really needed help, man. I was just really checking. I was really worried.
I mean, it seemed like it had been going on for a while. 10 times a day for a minute. I mean, that's a lot of fucking phone calls.
Yeah.
I just don't think it's explained by mental health. It's just not. So she said that she first went to Dr. Hamilton for an abortion in the early 90s and that she continued to see him as her gynecologist over the next 10 years after the first procedure.
So they were like flirting mid-ultrasound, mid-pap or something. So what brings you in today? Birth control?
Like he's just putting the speculum in and opening it up like, hey, how you doing? What you been up to? Your vagina looks great.
I would like to take you out. Get all up in this.
How do you feel about Italian food? Just squirting KY into his palm. Yeah. So she said that she did struggle with her mental health and that the Dr. Hamilton would give her samples of medication she needed for depression because sometimes she didn't have money to get her prescriptions. So he would help her out, basically. Which, again, it just doesn't make sense to me. Why would he have depression medication as samples? Like, that's just not reproductive related, you know?
Not at all.
I don't know.
Yeah, that's really weird.
It's just very weird. Yeah. So Aliena said that Dr. Hamilton had come to see her at work sometimes. She did say that. And she said she'd given him dances over the years for a while, not just once. It was a long time. And he had come to see her when she worked at 2 different strip clubs. Aliena also said that even though the dances only cost $20, he would always give her like $80 to $100.
Dang.
Yeah. It was kind of shocking that, you know, John, this person that put on this front of devoted husband, had been secretly going to strip clubs. But basically both him and Aliena said that nothing ever happened. They both were pretty insistent about it. In fact, Aliena said that she felt like John was trying to work up the courage to ask her out. Like she got that kind of feeling from him that he wanted to pursue something, but he never really kind of could get himself there, you know?
He just kept handing her 20s.
Right.
Not
just
ready
like,
yet.
Maybe next time.
Do you like me now? Do you like me now? How do you feel about me now?
It looks like this is the way to your heart, so I'm just going to keep handing you cash.
Just going to put that in your G-string. My number's on there if you ever want to.
Oh, wait, you have it. I call you all the time.
Yeah. Call me for depression pills.
Let me just slide these samples of Prozac into your thong.
That's weird, too, is that like depression pills, you can't just take like 2. You can't just do a sample like for them to work.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to be taking them for a while.
Yeah.
So how many is he fucking giving her?
Samples.
There's something about it that
He's
it just
weird.
doesn't add up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got a sample of birth control one time.
Yeah?
Yeah, it was good.
Wow.
From a gyno, though. No, from my pediatrician.
Did you say from a guy I know? Like just a guy you met on the corner?
I said gyno and then I said
I thought you said guy I know. Like
From
just
a
some
guy.
friend just sitting on your couch watching Netflix and just like, hey, do you need birth control?
My weed dealer. I was like, here's your 8th and try this new shit I got. You won't be pregnant for 5 years, dude. Don't eat grapefruits, though. Thanks, weed dealer.
You know everything. When Susan found out about the calls on February 8th, John promised her that he would completely cut it off. You know, he basically said, I would do anything to save my marriage, and I want to be with you. She doesn't matter. Nothing ever happened. Yada, yada, yada. And he just told her whatever she wanted, he would do to fix it. So she asked him to write a letter to Aliena. So he did. He wrote her a letter saying that he could no longer see her, he wouldn't be calling her anymore, and also that he couldn't be her doctor.
Don't you like how when people are like, nothing ever happened? As if, like, fucking is the one thing, like, that's what makes it, like, it actually happened. It's not like, okay, you kept giving her money. She kept giving you lap dances. You called her 1,000 times. You gave her a bunch of like, that's not doing anything. Yeah. That doesn't count because I didn't penetrate her.
That's forgivable.
It doesn't count if I didn't come. Like, what? That logic is just...
I mean, either you fucked or you didn't fuck. Like, it's just kind of a black or white issue, it seems like.
I didn't cheat on you. But I didn't.
The calls don't matter.
I didn't muster up the courage.
My dick was out during those calls. However, there's never, like, in her.
Yeah.
So, not cheating.
Yeah.
That's how it works. So in the letter, John told Aliena that he loved his wife and he didn't want to lose her, and he couldn't have any contact with her. So Susan vaguely vented to her neighbor, Susan Johnston, about her marital issues. Everyone up until this point, again, saw them as the perfect couple. He loved her, she loved him, you know. And this was the first kind of hint that something was wrong. Up until this time, nobody had ever really heard them even talk about fights they would have or, like, vent about annoying things, you know?
They were the perfect couple.
Yeah. So it was kind of notable to the neighbor that she would suddenly come out and say, okay, we're having some problems, you know? So the neighbor was also married to a doctor. And Susan spoke pretty generally about patients calling doctors. And she didn't go into specifics, but it was kind of clear to the neighbor what was going on, you know? Something inappropriate had happened and Susan felt uncomfortable, and she was kind of checking in with another doctor's wife to kind of figure it out, you know? So Susan Johnston, the neighbor, said that she thought their talk was pretty unusual, and Susan really didn't normally talk not only about marital issues, but about kind of anything, you know? She kept it very light and polite and whatever, you know? Susan Johnston said that Susan seemed angry and seemed like she really needed to talk to someone. She needed to kind of get it out and vent. She probably had been holding it in for a while, right?
Yeah,
if everything seems perfect, it's not like nothing's going wrong. People have issues.
Yeah, just to not talk about it, though. I mean, it's kind of embarrassing, too, to talk about a little bit. And that's why you would go to someone who you would
maybe
go to someone,
could relate.
Yeah, who has a husband. Like, does your husband pay for
How does your husband feel about strippers?
Yeah.
Is he for them?
For him.
Did he vote yes on strippers? So Susan's best friend, Sherry, that we talked about earlier, said that over the next week, they talked every single day, and she was kind of letting things out and venting about it. And Susan said she still loved her husband, but she didn't know that if she could get the trust back, basically, you know? Like, it wasn't really about love, it was about kind of feeling safe and having trust. But over the next few days, she also began believing John's story more and more, especially since, you know, Aliena said nothing happened. John was really insistent about it. It just seemed like she was kind of turning to the opposite opinion. Like, even though she suspected something was wrong, she was thinking maybe they didn't actually have an affair.
Yeah, maybe he really didn't cheat on her, even though he did all that bad stuff.
Right.
Or maybe, you know, you think about it, if it's worth salvaging.
Right. I think she was just, I think it's common for people to do that, right? Yeah. They've been in a relationship for 15 years. She's like, okay, you know what? Like, don't ever fucking do that again.
Yeah, you get one
chance. This is your one fucking warning, but I could see if nothing happened, it could be okay.
Yeah.
So by the end of that week, after she found out, the best friend, Sherry, says that it seemed like Susan truly believed that John didn't have an affair, but she was kind of upset about him kind of sneaking around and lying, about him talking to someone who was a stripper, and also because he was talking to someone that was a patient. It's highly inappropriate, and
Yeah,
it kind of puts their business in jeopardy.
absolutely. And how do you ever recover from that? I would never trust you to see another
Right? Like,
patient again.
you just have to ask at the front desk, like, do you dance for money? Okay, you can't be a patient here. Yeah, I think she was just kind of bummed out about that. I mean, what could that do if the stripper reported it, or if she was just, I don't know, like, it could really fuck them over.
Yeah, there's so many
That's a
things
big
wrong.
risk.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Sherry also said that over that next week, John called her frequently too, and he was trying to also discuss their problems.
Oh.
I'm glad you had the same reaction that I did, because I was like, that kind of fucked me up hearing about that. Like, I'm not very possessive of my significant others, but I'm sure as fuck possessive of my friends.
Yeah, but like you don't get
my friend in our breakup. Like,
get your own fucking friends.
We've been like I said earlier, they've been best friends for 37 years.
Yeah.
Like, you don't get to just vent to her.
Mm-mm.
That's my friend. You have friends. Go talk to your friends.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd be kind of pissed. So her best friend also said that John told her that Susan had brought up getting a divorce. And Sherry says, quote, Susan never said anything about divorce to me. And her reaction was that John would have been devastated. So again, you kind of have another friend, not really saying that it would hurt Susan, but just saying, like, reinforcing that it seems like John was way more intense about it, By all signs point to that.
Yeah, she was definitely more in love with her.
Yeah. So on February 13th, Valentine's Day Eve, Susan told her daughter that she was feeling afraid and lonely. Her daughter Angela said that her mother didn't sound like herself. She said that she could tell her mother was trying to basically put on a brave face and act really strong at first. But eventually, as their kind of conversation went on, Susan told her daughter, quote, I'm scared and I've never felt so alone in my life. Her daughter Angela said she could tell that her mother was very upset and very sad, which was pretty unusual for her. Like I said before, it seemed like everybody had this picture of her as pretty upbeat, and pretty happy-go-lucky.
Yeah, with their happy marriage, and she didn't really tell anyone too much.
Right.
And seems like she kept it together, held it together a lot. So
Yeah, everybody had that perception, and that seems like that's just what she put out there.
yeah, even if your own daughter says that, then
yeah,
because most of the time you just let it go to people at home. It's like
right.
Everyone on the outside,
they get to see the real shit.
Yeah, see the real you.
So Angela said, you could tell she was crying. She did not sound like my mom. So she tried to comfort her mother, but ultimately it didn't seem like anything could really be resolved in just one conversation, of course. So she just needed time to process things. And Angela thought, she'll just start feeling better soon. It just needs some time to heal. On the morning of Valentine's Day, 2001, John ordered an expensive arrangement of red orchids for Susan. He went to perform a surgery around 7 a.m. Then he came home to exchange their Valentine's Day cards with Susan. When he arrived home, Susan was in the bathroom and she was getting ready. So he went to talk to her in the bathroom and they began again kind of discussing their problems. At some point, the argument became heated and John's anger boiled over. There's no real account or any information about specifically what was said, but he basically, started to break down and take out his anger on her. So John grabbed a couple neckties from his closet.
No.
And returned to the bathroom. He strangled Susan with the neckties until she passed out. Once she was unconscious, he grabbed her head and slammed her forehead into the tile a few times. After that, he grabbed this decorative sculpture that was kind of sitting on the counter, and he bludgeoned her with it until she died.
Jesus, there's nothing to suggest that he was going to do that.
Yeah.
But no violence, or at least it seemed
Yeah,
like
there was really no history of violence. It was kind of out of nowhere.
Wow.
Yeah, it did seem like an unbalanced, kind of unhealthy attachment, but really there was no history of this kind of stuff. He didn't seem even like he was that possessive. He was just kind of a little bit too much for her.
Yeah,
That's
he seemed like he was scared that she was gonna divorce him, though. And I
Yeah.
guess the minute she said that, maybe she was like, "Hey, by the way, it's Valentine's Day, and I'm gonna just it's over," and then maybe that'll send someone into that rage.
Right. He panicked and he just lost his shit.
The statue thing gets me, though.
I know.
Ugh.
So once she was dead, John started to try to clean up the scene. But he was interrupted at around 8:50 when he got a page from the clinic saying he was late for his next procedure. The anesthesiologist had begun working on Dr. Hamilton's next patient, so John actually had to rush back to perform the surgery because he was already starting to put the next person under.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, like time was ticking. So John changed his bloody pants and took the, statue, the weapon that he used to kill Susan. He disposed of the evidence at an unknown location, it's never been found, and then went back to work and performed surgery.
Jesus.
Yeah. Fucking crazy.
Like, hey, at this job, we just like to leave our baggage and our work problems at the door.
Right? Like, can you imagine?
I noticed don't ever go into the bathroom. If you're fighting, don't fucking fight in the bathroom.
Oh, yeah.
Everything bad happens in the bathroom.
Yes.
Ugh.
Yeah. We've talked about that a few times.
Mm-hmm.
And the bathroom always smells way worse.
Yep.
Like when someone dies in a bathroom,
it's always worse.
Yeah, what case was it where that came up? Was it the Mulhall sisters?
Yeah, and then there was another one like right after that.
Yeah, like it just seems like if you have a crime scene in a bathroom, it's just going to be horrific and smell worse than anything else.
Cold tile, bleach, and blood.
Yes.
Copper.
Ooh, gross. So he did surgery on his next patient, and colleagues say that he seemed completely normal, which is, again, like so terrifying. Imagine that you were that person that had that procedure and then found out later that he had just murdered his wife.
Nope.
Yeah. So after the second surgery, John says that he returned home to pick up his date book that he had left at home. But when he returned home, he found the back door open and he discovered his wife laying in a pool of blood in the bathroom. He says that he tried to revive her and perform CPR, but he also just called 911 because it was clear that she was unresponsive. When the paramedics arrived, they found Susan naked on the bathroom floor and John hysterical and, of course, covered in his wife's blood. He told the EMTs that he had been frantically trying to save her life, but it was clear to everyone that it was too late right away. Susan's head had been smashed so badly that you could actually see parts of her brain. They were exposed. Yeah.
Yikes.
John was behaving pretty suspiciously, though. And about an hour after he made his 911 call, John was actually brought in for questioning.
Wow, that was fast.
Super fast. It's almost like they were in Australia. It's like Australia fast. So police noticed that during the car ride from the crime scene to the station, John was scraping his knuckles on the mesh divider inside the cop car.
Don't do that.
Right?
No need to do that.
Yeah. So they immediately suspected that he was trying to hide injuries on his hands right away.
Oh.
Yeah. During the interrogation, John was excessively emotional in front of detectives. He was really freaking out. But there's video surveillance that showed as soon as the detectives left the room and he was alone, he appeared completely calm. He kind of paced the room, he talked to himself, and detectives saw him checking his himself for injuries, specifically his shoulder. He was kind of looking in that mirror and trying to see if something could be seen on him. So clearly there was some sort of injury he had sustained, and he was trying to see if it was visible.
I guess this is before cop shows, so maybe this is okay to
Like, how would you not know that that's a burn?
There's a double-sided mirror usually,
Yes,
right? Like, or just something.
Yeah.
A camera pointed right at you.
I mean, what year did SVU start? Because this is 2000.
Don't ask me, don't ask.
But I feel like, I mean, that's like the first thing I learned from SVU, right? Someone's always watching the interrogation. Always. Yeah. So when he was in the interrogation room, John appeared to be pretty anxious. But he referred to himself as distraught when talking to detectives. But that's not really how they described him. He seemed stressed. He seemed anxious. Like, obviously, this is a pretty tense, high-stress situation. Mm-hmm. But he didn't really strike them as someone that had just discovered that their wife had been killed. You know, it definitely was weird. I found there's a show that has some of the interrogation footage. So I'm going to put that link in the show notes because it's pretty strange. There's one point where they're trying to take a picture of him like they do with anyone. They're taking a picture of his injuries, the stains on his clothes and everything. But he just puts up his hand in front of his face. Like, it's just, it seems like so small, you know? But there was something about it that's just weird. Like, every one of his actions was just trying to, like, get in the middle of the investigation, basically.
He's like, I have 25 frames. Fierce.
Right? Like,
fierce.
He was trying to straight up Vogue while they're taking pictures of bloodstains. It's just weird.
Ugh.
All of his actions are strange. He's rocking back and forth through part of it. He's doing things that you would think someone who wanted to appear fucked up would do. You know what I mean? Like,
just guilty ass shit.
He's just playing it up.
Don't ever rock.
Right. Never
Makes
rock.
you look nervous, not like distraught.
Yeah, it's not a sad action, you know? It's just nothing really added up. So if you want to check out that footage, I'm going to put the link in the show notes. So the police did consider that Dr. Hamilton's clinic did make the couple a possible target. You know, they wanted to look into that as possibly an issue with the anti-abortion protesters.
Yeah, people were trying to light their shit on fire.
Exactly. So you have to look into that. That's, of course, clearly an option. So colleagues and neighbors say that Susan and John had received threats and harassment, like even in the few days before the murder. Like, I think up to maybe 3 days before they had received another threat. But detectives really quickly honed in on John as their primary suspect. They pretty quickly cleared it, you know? It seemed to be definitely a crime of passion to them, you know? So detectives found an important clue in the Valentine's Day cards that the couple had exchanged. Susan's note in John's card read, "I bought my card 2 weeks ago, so I guess maybe these words don't seem as appropriate now, but I do love you. Have a good day, Susan."
Oh.
Yeah. I'd be pretty bummed if I got that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's pretty cold and kind of, I don't know. So John's card to Susan said, "We are important, loving, caring people together. My life would be incomplete without you. I love you, John."
I thought it was going to be a little creepier than that. I mean, I guess I can't go on without you.
Right.
If no one can have, or if I can't have you.
Something like that. Yeah, that would make sense. But still, this was enough for detectives to kind of know that there was some sort of conflict.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, even though it seems pretty subtle, It just kind of is striking as, okay, he's really loving, but she clearly is struggling with something within the relationship. So they wanted to find out what that was, of course. So when detectives kind of dug into the issues and tried to see, what neighbors and friends and family had said might be going on in their relationship, they learned about the possible affair with the exotic dancer. They decided to look more closely at John and, of course, gather more information to see what was going on there. Initially, it seemed like John had an alibi since he performed 2 surgeries that morning. When detectives went to kind of follow up on his alibi and they looked more closely at his schedule and his phone records, detectives found that John had a period of time between the 2 procedures. And they could also see that he had received that page indicating that he was late returning for the second procedure. So they were able to determine that he really did have enough time to return home, commit the crime, and come back in time for the second surgery. So, of course, they kept looking further into John's account of what had happened that day. So the 911 call struck the detectives as pretty odd. So it was submitted for voice stress analysis. In the 911 call, John sounded frantic and kind of hyped up and stressed out, but not really scared or distraught like you would assume someone would be in that situation. So the voice stress analysis testing charted the micro tremors in John's voice during the call to kind of analyze his stress levels and maybe kind of attach some emotion to it. So the experts determined that there was no, quote, no excessive blood flow impacting John's voice. So the voice stress analyst therefore determined that John was not stressed to the extent of a person that would normally be in this situation, right? Considering all the circumstances, his stress level and his voice didn't match. So the expert concluded that the microtremors in John's 911 call were consistent with someone that had actually rehearsed the phone call in his head, and kind of gone through it and kind of de-escalated that stress.
That's insane to me that they could
Tell all of that.
Mm-hmm.
I know.
I need a handheld device, one of those.
Right?
No, but it says here you don't really actually care. It says that you're talking. It seems like
you need a travel voice stress analysis.
Yeah. Oh, so you've rehearsed this before.
Really, that's kind of, that's how they concluded it, was just like someone that was just picking up the phone blind, discovering this scene with their wife, and then picking up the phone right away would have a certain amount of tremor in their voice, would have a certain amount of stress, and that is, I guess, indicated by blood flow. Crazy. So they kind of deduced that he didn't really have that. He must have thought about it ahead of time. And you have to think, he had a whole surgery. He had a whole car ride to work and back from work to think about exactly what he needed to say. So with each of those kind of rehearsals in his head or out loud, it probably got his stress down more and more each time he thought about, okay, how am I supposed to really make this 911 call sound real?
Yeah, so planning it out and knowing exactly what you were going to say kind of just ended up screwing him over.
Exactly. Yeah.
Just freestyle it next time.
Just go off the top of the dome, John. After the voice stress analysis, John was charged with Susan's murder. So many people in the community came to his defense. He was, of course, this prominent figure, part of this, very affluent couple in the area. A lot of people just kind of couldn't believe it. There were a ton of people in the community that showed support for him. Even when details about his possible affair and the calls to the exotic dancer were revealed, public opinion was still that at worst, he'd kind of crossed a professional boundary and maybe been a little bit unethical, but couldn't really be capable of murder, basically. People even thought that if he indeed was having an affair, it was probably more likely that the mistress had killed Susan than John. That was like the general consensus.
That would, I mean, not that, well, because they didn't really talk to her, but that would seem like it, especially because they don't really have open problems like that. So
Right.
all of a sudden, this new person comes in, and shit just goes
Yes.
crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be, of course, someone to look into, like if there is actually a mistress and it's a really a for real affair, that's possible. They could be a suspect. But all signs really pointed to John, but everybody just didn't believe it. They were shocked. John's defense team claimed that there was no direct evidence that John was the murderer, and they also kind of focused and emphasized that no murder weapon had actually been found, and therefore, of course, couldn't really be tested or, DNA found on it that was his or anything like that that linked him. The maid said that there was this marble kind of statue figure that was missing from the bathroom, and of course, that was the one that was grabbed in the murder. This was assumed that it was the murder weapon, but of course, not having it there to test or anything, there was no way to know for sure. But it's just kind of assumed. The defense also said that police had honed in on John too quickly and that they hadn't really paid enough attention to the other threats, especially from the anti abortion activists. The defense attorney also made a couple remarks that Susan was jealous and controlling of her husband.
Wow.
Which was so fucked up, Yeah, I think that's just crossing the line,
I don't want to speak ill of the dead, but she jealous.
Right? I mean, you didn't hear it from me, but yeah, I don't know. Like, who does that? You can build a defense. Right? I don't know. It just seems like you could probably like build your case off of something factual. Don't try and, slander them or I don't know.
Yeah, they both went to blaming the women. Like,
oh, of course.
It was either the mistress or the wife that was insecure or jealous.
It couldn't be the white man.
Yeah.
Never. So the DA, of course, set out to convince the jury that even though John was seen as quite sympathetic, that all the forensics pointed to him, District Attorney Wes Lane said, quote, "He was just obsessed with her. When he saw that this incredible woman was looking like she was leaving him, he lost it." Basically the same thing we've already said. So at trial, prosecutors proved that John had ample time, of course, to return home between procedures, which is, evidence that the detectives found. And they proved that he would have enough time to commit the acts and come back and make it to the surgery. The DA also asserted that because the bathroom was full of mirrors, it would be impossible for anyone to sneak up on Susan, especially someone that she didn't know, She would, of course, turn around, like there would be more signs of a struggle. But because, this person must have just come up and approached her without any struggle, that it meant that she must have known her attacker, And especially she was getting ready, must have been just getting out of the shower because she was naked. It really kind of pointed to her husband.
Yeah, you would throw some clothes on or like
if it was anyone else. Yeah. The autopsy found that the cause of death was blunt force trauma, and there were no signs of sexual assault. So, of course, since Susan wasn't raped and there was nothing really valuable missing from the house, it was really concluded that this must have been a crime of passion. And of course, that meant John was clearly the one with a motive. The prosecutor also showed that there were blood and skin cells found inside John's car, like on the steering wheel and on the side of his seat by the door. And of course, the prosecutors presented that this was evidence that he had gotten in his car and driven somewhere after finding his wife, To them, that concluded that he had committed the murder, went to work, and, come back.
Yeah, instead of just staying there with your wife, right?
Right. But John took the stand and he attempted to explain the fact that blood was in his car. As a defense witness, John countered that the blood was there because he realized his car was in the driveway and he had tried to move it out of the way so the paramedics could pull in after he called 911. John said that he was shaking so badly that he couldn't get the key in the ignition, so he just left the car in the driveway. I just
So
I have so much trouble with that.
You didn't do what you just were setting out to do.
Right. So you just left the car there. And also, it's just hard to imagine yourself in any situation this crazy. But I would imagine if I discovered my significant other basically dead, I wouldn't want to leave their side.
At all.
At all. Like, I just couldn't imagine just getting up and being like, oh, maybe I should move my car right now.
Yeah.
That would not be in my head if I'm sitting there with someone I love that, you know, is severely injured or possibly dead.
Yeah.
You know, and he's a doctor. So if there is any possibility that she could be revived or that she's still alive, why would he leave her side?
Yeah.
You know, he can still do something between the time that he calls 911 and the paramedics arrive. Has the medical training, right?
Totally. And he said he tried to, so.
But then just leaves. That just doesn't make sense to me. Yeah. John also testified that he loved his wife and never could have murdered her. He insisted, again, that he wasn't having an affair either. John testified that he is not the type of person, quote, to fly off the handle, and he said, I don't just snap.
Which makes it doesn't seem like he was. That
right.
Kind of makes sense.
Until something made him snap. You know? Like, yeah, maybe not before, but yeah.
Until Valentine's Day rolled around.
It's a lot of pressure, man. Mm-hmm. So the defense and prosecution were kind of swaying jurors back and forth, earning a point here and there, you know. But blood spatter turned out to be the key evidence in the trial.
Oh, dang.
The prosecution presented an expert that testified that the spatter on John's shoe could only be caused by hitting Susan, not CPR. The way that the patterns were, and basically the fact that he didn't throw away his shoes. He threw away his pants, but he didn't throw away his shoes. So the way that the blood hit his shoes so quickly and the way that the blood patterns were shaped meant that it had traveled after being hit. You know what I mean? It was a splash instead of like CPR related.
Yeah, it wasn't just pressed up against, it was a splatter, you know? It had some force behind it, which if you're doing CPR, you're not flinging blood everywhere.
Exactly.
It's more, you know, in line with a statue coming down.
Yes. So. Yeah, exactly. The defense hired their own crime scene investigator named Tom Bevel to testify about his analysis of the same blood spatter, basically. The defense expert testified that the blood on the front of John's shirt and his pants was consistent with patterns that would be caused by trying to save her life and performing CPR and everything. However, the defense attorney asked the expert if there was anything that the prosecution had missed that was pertinent. Tom Bevel was under an oath to tell the truth, of course, so he told the court about additional evidence that he found.
Oh, dang.
Yeah. So Tom said that he also found additional spatter that the prosecution expert didn't find and didn't testify about. Tom testified that he had found spatter on the inside of the cuff of John's shirt. So basically meaning the space between the wrist and the inner fabric, you know?
Were they kind of just like, hey, shh.
I know, he's like, no, I didn't mean it. I take it back. So this was basically spatter that had kind of come up inside the cuff and then landed up to 4 inches inside the shirt, which is a long way.
Which you need force behind, and that's just not going to come from CPR.
Exactly. So it had been traveling at a high speed, indicating it happened during blunt force trauma. This did not happen during CPR. And again, this was a defense witness. So, you know, he testified that he didn't think this particular spatter could have come from CPR or anything like that. The expert also told media outlets that this spatter was, quote, almost a neon sign pointing towards the wearer of this shirt being associated with the beating.
Was he like, I forgot what side I was on. Wait,
Really?
which
Wait,
team am I
where am I supposed to sit? I'm on the other side. Oh, okay. Shit.
on? What? I mean, good for him. I like that
he's honest.
he's under oath, but I like that too. It just shows you that there's no the witnesses that they bring up or the testimony that they both give just contradict each other. So one person was like, okay, that's not consistent, or that is consistent, and the other one was like, no, it's not. So if you're under oath, is that really what he thinks, or was that like, does he really believe that the blood splatter originally was from CPR, or was that just because he was paid to be up there as a?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that he was probably telling the truth.
Yeah.
He did say that it was CPR for the shirt and the pants. I couldn't find anything about him testifying about the shoes. So they may have just chosen to kind of omit that, like, oh, if we don't talk about that, maybe it just didn't happen,
Because I was like, they're just kind of contradicting each other, which means there's no concrete evidence in blood splatter testimony, and like looking at the way no one's right.
Yeah, I mean, the prosecution expert was like, the shoes point to him doing it.
Okay.
The defense expert was like, well, the pants and the shirt say that this only happened through CPR.
Yeah.
But once they asked him, is there anything else? He felt like he was obligated to tell the truth. And he's like, yeah, the cuff definitely points to him committing the murder.
Shit.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he switched sides. And that was, of course, huge for the jury to see.
Yeah.
To them, that was like, well, a defense witness flipped. So obviously he's guilty. So Tom said that he had no choice but to tell the court the truth. He had to tell them what he knew, even if it hurt the client who had actually hired him. It was just the truth. He said, quote, ultimately, you can take an oath to tell the truth, and that overrides any allegiance you may have had to your client. Which, I mean, it's a lot of integrity, So the fact that a defense witness had found evidence implicating John in the murder kind of became this irreversibly damaging, fact to the defense case. So it took the jury less than 2 hours to find John Hamilton guilty of first-degree murder. He was later sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Woohoo!
At sentencing, the judge told John, quote, the majority of the jurors were very disappointed that they didn't have the sentence of death as an option. You should consider yourself very lucky. That's pretty fucked up. Susan's daughter, Angela, that we talked about earlier, said that she actually chose to visit John in jail and confront him about the murder. John said to her, you know how much I love your mother, and I would never do this.
No.
And he just kept insisting.
How dare you?
Even after he was convicted, he never came forward with, talking about where the murder weapon went. He's never admitted guilt. Angela says that his face showed that he was upset, but there were no tears. There was no real kind of, I don't know, she just felt like he wasn't genuine.
He's upset he's in jail.
Exactly. He feels sorry for himself. That's it. So John continues to appeal the conviction, but has so far been denied a retrial. He still, of course, has supporters in the community that still believe that he's innocent and that he loved his wife too much to kill her. Yeah. And that's the story of Susan and John Hamilton from Valentine's Day.
That was...
Happy Valentine's Day? I'm sorry.
I'm never falling in love. Don't fall in love because it'll probably kill you in one way or the other.
Is that what we just learned?
Or it'll make you gain like 50 pounds.
Oh, shit. Those are the only two options?
It'll make me start drinking again, probably.
Oh, yeah, there's that.
I mimight pop some living thing out of my body, too. I don't know.
Ooh, that would be bad.
Probably like the worst.
Bad
Take
news.
the 50 pounds.
Just a 50-pound parasite that eventually has you buy them diapers and
send
shit.
them to college and stuff. Yep.
Yeah, I don't know. This one, I remember hearing about it a long time ago, and I forgot that it happened on Valentine's Day. I don't know how I could forget that, but I remember hearing about John and Susan.
That's
and
so
I
sad.
just, it was very striking, It wasn't, Of course, you never want to hear that there's a history of violence in relationship. Of course, you never want to hear that.
Yeah.
But it just it is really frightening when it truly comes out of nowhere, you know?
Yeah.
Nobody ever, even after, he was convicted, came forward and said, oh, I kind of could tell this would happen.
Yeah.
Like nobody came forward and said, oh, there were certain signs, there were certain red flags. Everybody has pretty much been in the complete shock of it. It just seems so out of character for him, for their relationship, which I don't know, it just makes it really stand out because there are so many cases where you can look back and there is that hindsight of, okay, there's this and that leading up to the murder.
Yeah, you can see it coming a lot of the times. There's like a history of violence in this, which is out of nowhere.
It just seems so unique because there isn't that kind of history for them.
I don't like that people can just snap like that.
I know. I'm kind of preoccupied with that. The fact that people are pretty close to kind of losing their mind
all
sometimes.
The time.
Yeah. I don't know, everything seems normal, and then all of a sudden they fucking lose their shit on the freeway.
Yeah.
I don't think it is unique, but it's not impossible.
No.
It happens more than you think.
Makes me feel bad about those couples, and I'm like, oh my God, they're just so perfect. Like, their life is just so good, and I bet you they have the best sex. Like,
they never do.
What?
You know that.
Maybe. I don't. Yeah, I think
the
the
couples
ones that
look so perfect, they're like, oh, babe. No,
the ones
never good sex.
Yeah, the ones that fight and then like always end up back together. You're like, what's keeping them together?
You're like, yeah.
Oh, the
dick,
fuckweed.
Dick.
Yeah. The fucking keeps them together.
For sure. Yeah, I don't know. It is true. Like, there is no such thing as a perfect couple. There's always conflict. There's always need for resolution and honesty and difficult conversations and compromise and all sorts of that bullshit.
Yeah.
But, it's okay to not be perfect.
Totally.
Sometimes perfect means you're going to fucking snap.
Yeah, you're definitely going to snap.
So, I think that's pretty much it for Valentine's Day special.
Well, I am in the mood. to true crime and chill.
Next week we're gonna start the next letter W. So I mean,
for Wiener Schnitzel,
it's a mystery. Yes, definitely.
Weinstein.
So, oh my God, we're gonna do like the next year is gonna be about that. Yeah, so I don't know. We did a Patreon listener thing. We did Valentine's Day, and then we'll start W next week.
Yes,
yeah,
I'm
so
excited.
I guess just a reminder, you can find our social media links and, resource links and some of our reference material.
That cool interview that you were saying.
Yes, the show notes will have the interrogation footage because I found it quite interesting. And also our Threadless and our Patreon will be in the show notes. If you want shirts and phone cases, mugs, someone bought a journal the other day. That's pretty cool. And and our Patreon has bonus episodes and stickers, condoms, magnets, buttons. So we wanted to say thank you again
to Jillian, Courtney, Peter, Paul, and Randy.
So close.
Jillian, April,
Jillian, Paul, Jennifer, Courtney. Yeah.
Oh, Courtney. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much for your support on Patreon. We really appreciate it. It means a lot. Like, every one of them means a fucking ton to me.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I would be an exotic dancer hooking up with OBGYNs if it wasn't for...
it could happen still. Gotta dream big.
It means the world.
So, I think we could sign off.
Yeah, we could true crime chill Haagen-Dazs.
Yeah, Wiener Schnitzel. Build a moat.
Excited.
And chill. Bye.
Bye. And happy Valentine's Day.
Oh, happy Valentine's Day. I'm a dick.
Happy fuck week. Bye.
Welcome to the promo for the Marble Orchard Podcast, the weekly podcast that explores emerging mysteries of the American Southwest, hosted by me, Prickly Pete, and my co-host,
Faye Daniel. And we're not just another true crime podcast, we also discuss history, unexplained events, and local monsters.
You can find the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or your favorite podcast listening app.
At Metro, the best deal in wireless is on. Switch to Metro and get one full Amazon Prime membership included every month. Plus, get 2 free phones from top brands like Samsung and LG with huge HD screens. All with 2 lines for just $90. That's the best deal in wireless, only at Metro. Plus sales tax and activation fee. Requires port-in of eligible number not currently active on T-Mobile network or active on Metro in past 90 days. Limit 4 per account or household.